Good evening and welcome to the February 22nd, 2021 meeting of the Auburn Board of Selectmen. This open meeting of the Auburn Board of Selectmen is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's Executive Order of March 12, 2020, which suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely as long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. For the public to join the meeting remotely by telephone, please dial 1-408-650-3123 and enter access code 235-235-861. Or the public can join via computer at global.gotomeeting.com/join/235-235-861. All supporting materials that have been provided to members of this body are available on the town's website. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Tristan LaLiberty?
Yes.
Lionel Berthume?
Yes.
Daniel Carpenter?
Yes.
Scott Wren?
Yes.
Town officials and employees participating, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Town Manager Julie Jacobson?
Yes.
Assistant Town Manager and CFO Ed Kazanovich?
Yes.
Administrative Assistant Sharon Kwiatkowski? Sharon, is that you as caller one? Okay. I'm going to take Town Manager's affirmation that Sharon is on the call. We do, let's see, we do not
Sure,
have...
I believe that's Sharon. Hopefully she can unmute and just confirm, but usually that's how her call appears.
Okay. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by Auburn Cable Television, and also note that each vote taken at this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. So I officially call this meeting to order, and under public hearings and presentations, our first presentation is the presentation of the financial audit report, and I'm going to turn it over to CFO Ed Kazanovich to make the introductions and introduce the report.
Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you for this opportunity. And before I introduce Tom Scanlon from Scanlon Associates, I'd like to make just a few comments about the process and where we are as a result of the audit. So the audit presented to you tonight, although very favorable, I can tell you it was a challenging experience on both sides due to the restrictions and limitations placed upon us by COVID-19. I must say it was not an easy participating in a primarily remote audit. That being said, I'd like to thank Tom and his crew for their patience and understanding in coping with the complexities of performing this remote audit. Hopefully, this will be our one and only. Moving forward, we can resume and conduct independent auditors as we're all accustomed to. But before I turn it over to Tom, I would like to highlight some of Auburn's key financial strengths. I think despite the pandemic that hit in the last quarter of FY 2020, the town continued to build upon its reserves and free cash. The town immediately put a spending and hiring freeze in place, not knowing revenue and expense impacts that would result from COVID-19. I believe this early action helped contribute to our positive outcome and a favorable closing to our undesignated fund balance and our reserves at year end. For year ending 2020, as of June 30th, our undesignated fund balance was $20,335,000 and change. This balance represents a ratio of about 31.5% of the town's general fund operating budget operating revenue. I can tell you that's a very favorable ratio, and we've worked hard to get there over the years. In addition, the town's free cash balance as of 6/30 was $15.75 million. It was an increase of about $1.9 million over the prior fiscal year. The town also continues to maintain a healthy stabilization account with a balance as of June 30th of about $3.350 million. And that does not include the additional $250,000 that was appropriated for the current fiscal year. As well as our OPEB balance was roughly $5.2 million as of 6/30. And we also have in FY21 an additional contribution of $400,000 in the newly implemented and negotiated employee contribution, funding about $48,000 to $50,000 annually, and that will grow as time goes on. Finally, the town continues to maintain a healthy self-insured trust balance. As of June 30th, it was about $10.6 million. And as a result of that, that allowed us to offer in FY21 2 premium holidays for the fiscal year. Not only did that save our employees money, but that also saved us, the town, our share of that contribution for those 2 holiday periods. In summary, this reflects some of the positive aspects of the annual audit, and I know once Tom speaks upon the financial statements that he's presented tonight, there'll be other details that he will highlight as well. So with that, I'm happy to turn it over to Tom for his presentation of the audit. Thank you.
How's everyone doing tonight? It's been a unique year to say the least. It was a challenge doing a remote audit. We need a lot of cooperation from the town. We did a lot of stuff through a portal. So I'd just like to thank the town for their participation in it. We really, with the COVID and aspect, and it's all about like risk management and risk and audit with control risk. We tried to stick to our procedures the best we could. We really dove deep into the collector's office and the treasurer's office. That's where your 2 largest assets are. That's where your revenue comes in. So we wanted to make sure your controls are still in place while COVID was around, that you're still reconciling, receipts are still going to proper funds, and all your controls remained intact, which is good. So we dove a little deeper into your bank recs just to ensure that they were taking place. Payroll, making sure your controls over payroll were there still as they were before COVID, and kind of like you split into 2 things. You had pre-COVID and then you had COVID. You want to make sure your controls remained consistent throughout, and the towns have. And we do have, on our management letter, we do have we've been putting into all our management letters, just reminding the towns of the need of your controls that need to be in place. The signing of the payrolls, the approval of the payrolls, the approval of the bills, making sure they get into the right accounting period. And along with COVID, there's going to be numerous funding sources and grants, and making sure they're being properly identified between federal and state. There's a lot of compliance requirements they're coming with these COVID grants. And on the other side of it is unemployment fraud. Unfortunately, towns are being taken advantage of, and it's been time consuming when you're getting false unemployment claims from the town. You have to go through them. You have to make sure you're getting the proper credit back. So all those things we want to encourage that they're taking place. And the town does have excellent controls in those regards. So it's good to see them, status quo for all of it. And just to go on to, I kind of want to walk through your financials with you, just kind of the numbers that Eddie had gone through. I think it's very important, the kind of that's one odd is we're opining on those financial statements, and that where those numbers come from, that they represent something that bond rating agencies are using, using those numbers, and they're using our report too, when you go onto the bond market, they're very favorable. So on page 19 of the audit, I don't know if you have it, it's part of your packet, I think. This is your general fund balance sheet, your governmental funds. It's on modified accrual basis of accounting. You don't see depreciation in here. It's probably the most useful for current. See where your reserves are. And the number of the general fund unassigned, the 20.3 million. And that is your unassigned fund balance, and that is basically your free cash and your stabilization funds. That's the components of what make that up. Again, that's 20.3 million, which is, as Ed said, it's 31% of basically your operating budget, which is a benchmark that a lot of bond rating agencies or DOR look at to see the financial health of a community. And usually 10 to 15% is ruled as good, advantageous. You can see you're double that. So your financial policies are working. And I think it's always important to know like where your free cash comes from. I think free cash was at 15.7 million, I believe, as you said. And again, you're rolling it over. I believe prior year's free cash was 13.5 million. So you're roughly generating about 2.5 in your budget. And I think it's always important to know where it comes from. And on page 23, this is your budget versus actual. You can kind of see where it came from. It's on the top half is your revenues. So what you're generating towards that free cash figure of 15 million from the current year is about 769. That was on your revenue side. You see the most part came from license permits and fees, 344,000, and also excise taxes. And again, these are all like market-based. It kind of goes on the economy. Your motor vehicles based on the cars being purchased. So it's always good to be conservative on that, which you are. And then under intergovernmental, you'll see as a variance of like 266,000 is the state reimburses you for vets, blind, and surviving spouses exemptions as you get every year. And the town hasn't received, for the last 2 fiscal years, the state hasn't reimbursed you those monies, which is an issue on the state end. Hopefully those will be coming in 2021. I want to say the two combined, both years are about $180,000 that they still owe you. So we'd recommend to keep on follow up with that to make sure they give it to you. Which I think Jeff had gone over with you and during field work, Ed, I believe.
Yeah, we have received that, Tom, since. So.
Good. Yeah, so it was on the state's end. They did it with a few communities, and I'm not too sure the reasoning why. But to continue with the free cash on page 23, you can see appropriation turnbacks about 1.7 million, which helped generate, which is your free cash increased about 2.5 million. The majority it came on the expenditure turnback side, which I think has a little bit to do with COVID. We've been seeing in other communities the spending it on the revenue side going forward, really reviewing that and see where it's impacting you. Again, from a financial health reserve, you're outstanding. I mean, there's not too many communities that can, across this Commonwealth, they can say 30% they have in their reserves, which is attributed to your financial policies. And then OPEB, I always have to comment on OPEB because it seems to be the rage nowadays. You've got some outside the box thinking when it comes to OPEB. You're very creative and like I said, outside the box thinking. You contributed 600,000 the last 2 years to your OPEB trust. That's about 5.5 million. At June 30th, 2020. One thing I will say, OPEB is a very long-term thinking. It's about building up reserves so someday, hopefully that trust will pay for the premiums on the retirees when they retire, so you can help talk about future budgets. So financial-wise, everything is lining right up, and you can see who these numbers are coming from on your financial statements. I don't know if there's any particular questions on the financial end of it anyone has?
Do board members have any specific questions? I'm not seeing it.
That's good. And then you did, you used to have another report in your packet. It's called the single audit package. Basically, it's testing the federal funds. The town of Auburn receives about 1.5 million in federal funds, mainly from the school department. And that's where we tested the SPED grants. And basically, it's more of a compliance report. We had no findings with the grants. So you have sound grant management. And I know that will be tested going forward here with all this COVID monies coming in, that your grant management's going to have to be pretty sound, because there's going to be a lot of compliance requirements with these new, I'm sure Ed, you can comment on the reimbursements for the no A&F money and the FEMA money, all the forms you got to fill out and all the compliance. So yeah, your grant management's going to be tested here over the next couple of years. And that's about it for my presentation.
Mr. Kazanovich, do you want to add anything, or otherwise I'll open it up to board comments?
Yeah, I just would like to expand upon that last comment, and I think Tommy was spot on. I think these are some of the complexities we're facing with the federal money, with CARES and FEMA. And I can already tell you that we've done a number of journal entries that are applicable to last fiscal year and preparing to do some for this year to reallocate some of those expenditures, given the unknowns of what was allowed under FEMA and CARES. And it's like a can of worms. It gets very complex and complicated. So we're trying to prepare a 3-ring binder that's going to cross-reference all those journal entries and make it somewhat easier to follow through. But I can tell you, at least my head is spinning, dealing with all of these eligible expenses and what's deemed ineligible, and what's FEMA, what qualifies for FEMA. And even along the way, FEMA has changed the guidelines as to what qualifies, and dates are changing. So we're trying to stay on top of it, and it's really consumed a lot of my time. But we do what we have to do in order to comply. So it's going to be interesting to pull this all together in the next year. And I think it's actually probably going to cross over the next 2 fiscal years, because
Yeah.
it expires, I believe, in a year from this past December.
Yeah, it's definitely going to cross 2 fiscal years.
So we had to deal with it in FY20, we're going to deal with it in FY21 and FY22. So 3 fiscal years. Madam Chair, that's all I have to say. Once again, I'd like to thank Tom and his staff and everyone who participated on our end. We've been at this for a better part of a month and a half, and coming to a conclusion tonight. So thank you, Tom, and please thank everyone
Yeah, well.
who participated. Much appreciated.
And Mr. Scanlon, if you'll just stay on the call for a minute, I do want to open it up to board comments regarding the audit. Do members want to comment at this point? Anyone?
Madam Chair, I'll just say that I appreciate Scanlon Associates for what they did with the audit. It looks like they have a lot of good recommendations in here, as well as performing the audit. There's some pages here with some recommendations on how we can do things better. And, certainly it looks like CFO has done a wonderful job, and our management's done a good job with continuing on the path that we're going to make sure that we have funds in reserve, and, you know, we're still trying not to tax the heck out of everybody, but I just think that the town's done a good job, and I want to thank Scanlon Associates for putting this together. It's a very thorough report, and I haven't even gotten all the way through it, but what I've seen is very impressive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else want to comment? So seeing none, I'll just make a couple comments here. I did take a couple notes, and I too want to thank Mr. Scanlon. I mean, you know, we are in unique and different times, especially dealing with this audit. You know, what jumped out at me is, you know, number one, COVID-19 impact on operations and procedures. And we're dealing with something that we haven't dealt with before. And even with that, you know, you credit the town for, you know, an outstanding audit, you know, especially compared to some communities, you know, speaking about our reserves, crediting the financial policies that the Board of Selectmen, the Finance Committee, the Town Manager, CFO, you know, continue to put in place, the thinking outside the box of OPEB liability responsibilities, you know, noting the compliance requirements, and also the Board of Selectmen having confidence that we have, you know, sound grant management, which is significant. Overall, I'm very pleased with this. I thank you for this audit. I'm always happy to hear that you hold our audit up in high regard. And I thank the CFO, his team, and the town manager for their continued incredible efforts on the financial management of the town.
The chair, thank you. If I can just jump in also, and thank you, Tom, and your team. I know it was a challenge to get this done this year. We appreciate it. And as always, you're all very professional and great to work with. So thank you for all you do.
Well, my staff is professional. I don't know about me. But...
Yeah, well done. And I just want to also reiterate what the chair just said, and Tom, just some of your comments. I want to thank Ed Kazanovich for all the work he does, as well as all the department heads. You know, this really is a team effort led by Ed on the financial end to keep everybody in keeping with the documentation and the grants management and everything else that we have on our plates in the midst of COVID. It really has been a challenge. So also, Lionel, I want to thank you for your comments as well. It does show when you hear Tom mention that the town is in excellent financial condition. Given a global pandemic, that means a lot to us because we worked really hard, as Selectman Berthium was saying, to make sure we don't tax the taxpayers when we don't have to. And I think this shows that just because funding is available, we don't spend it. We spend what we need, not what we're able to spend. And that's a big difference here. And I think you'll see that when Ed does his presentation shortly on the budget for the coming year. This has just been our philosophy for the last 10 years, that we only we make do with what we need, and we do our best to keep the levels down. Including this year, we're using 0% of Prop 2.5, which is just unheard of in COVID times.
That is unheard of. Yes.
It is unheard of. I mean, we made some reductions where we had to, and I'm sure Ed will talk about it, but we're proud that we've been able to do that. And when we need to come to the town for funding, I hope the town has confidence in us that we're only coming for the funding that we actually do need, not just funding that we want. And there's a big difference. But I think to hear that the town's in excellent financial condition, that we've built our reserves to 31%, that we follow and adhere to the financial policies that this board adopted, as well as the Finance Committee. We just want to assure you that those policies absolutely help us. They help us on a daily basis with our decision-making on the financial end, and they help us with our bond rating when we go out to bonding on whether it be our CIP or major capital projects. So all of those policies have been very helpful to us. So just wanted to give kudos to Ed Kazanovich, and once again, thank you, Tom, for
No
working
problem.
with us. Hopefully next year we'll all be back to.
I'm
new
hoping.
normal. The
I'm
COVID,
hoping.
the CARES Act will still be there, but that's a good thing because it still
That's
gives
good.
us funding where we need it, right? But
Yeah,
paperwork
correct.
is daunting, to say the least. So,
Yes.
Madam Chair, one other comment I'd like to add, and just to add on to what Julie said. I think our budgetary method really demonstrates our commitment to keeping the level of taxation down. If you look at our excess levy, where it's 7.2 million. And certainly, we've worked hard not to tax it 2.5, and I know we do. And it may be part of my presentation. I know I do at the end of town meeting, but over the last 11 years, we haven't taxed to the full levy of 2.5. In fact, 2 of the years within the 11, we taxed at 0.00. So we are serious about trying to hold the line. Any given year, we can exercise our portion of excess levy if we wanted to go to 2.5 and beyond. It's there to do so. We choose not to do that. We're focused on building up our reserves, continue to budget on a conservative basis on both revenue and expense, meet our contractual obligations, and focus on priorities that are really going to pay dividends to our residents. So we're going to continue to do that. And I think our budget that we're putting forth tonight does show that we are using a large portion of 2.5, but we always come in that way and we manage to get it down as best we can through the process. So once again, Tom, thank you for participating,
Thank you.
presenting, and good luck to you and your family and your crew.
Yeah, you too. Everyone else too. Have a good night.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you.
So moving on, we have Board of Selectmen general items, and we have a requested vote to transmit the town manager CFO's fiscal year 2022 budget to the Finance Committee in accordance with the town charter and bylaws. I'm going to turn to, not sure who's going to take this, Mr. Kazanovich?
Yes, so if you're just giving me a minute while I share my screen and open up my presentation, and then we can get going.
Thank you.
Let me see.
while Ed is getting that ready, just a comment through the chair to the members of the board who are on this. On your screens to the right, you'll see a plus and a minus column to the right. If you want to make it larger so you can see it, as I do, use the plus sign and you can expand the screen and you'll be able to see the numbers a little bit easier. Thanks.
I just want to make sure, can everyone see the presentation? Okay, thank you. Okay, so we officially are presenting this FY22 budget to the Board of Selectmen in hopes that you will vote to send it off to the Finance Committee. We do have a Finance Committee meeting scheduled for Wednesday of this week, which will officially begin their process and leading up to our annual town meeting. So let me just move this here for a minute. Okay, so what we're presenting to you tonight is a budget that currently utilizes about 2.31 out of 2.5. That's a utilization rate of about 92.44%. And I believe when we presented the budget last year, we were in a similar position. We were at 2.3 some odd percent. And we managed to get that down to 0. Now, that's going to be very difficult to do given the level of state funding that has been recommended by the governor, and I'll get into that. But we still do remain conservative on our new growth, and we have some major projects going on in Auburn that hopefully will get us above and beyond the $450,000 that we estimated. But right now, this budget presents to you total appropriations of about 72.4 million, with total revenue sources at about 72.5 million, leaving a unobligated amount of about 92,000. This would put our excess levy at 7.2, and once again, a utilization of 2.31 out of 2.5. When we look at the revenue sources, our local receipts is estimated to go up about 282,000, or just under 3%. Our cherry sheet revenue, about 249,000, up 1.70%. Tax levy, this includes 2.5 estimated new growth of 450, would be an increase of 4.02%. Our debt exclusions go down roughly by 50,000, a reduction about 1.75%. And our available funds are down, and this is primarily in the form of free cash, which normally comes at our fall town meeting, down about 39%, or about 1.050 million. For total revenue, increase of $1,087,000, up 1.52%, offset by appropriations, an increase of 1.39% of $995,000. Here's what I'm concerned about. Our Chapter 70, under the governor's proposed budget, we're only getting a $72,000 increase. If you look at the last 5 fiscal years, it was 534,000, almost 1.1 million, just shy of a million, just shy of 800,000. And this year, an increase of a little over 400,000. We lost about 100 students in our enrollment counts, and I've been told that's COVID related. Parents wanted to look at alternatives as a result of COVID. Because our enrollment numbers are down, we got a corresponding reduction of state aid. Now, we don't know if that's a temporary thing or a permanent thing. I think only time will tell. But that's concerning, as well as our Bay Path assessment, which we had an increase of about 10 students, which resulted in an increase as well. So these are all the budget recommendations under FY22. I won't bore you and go through these. Once again, if you look at bottom line, 72,413,000. These are the increases based upon the departmental requests. So when you look at the blended bottom line, 1.39, 995,000. That's the amount I highlighted on the prior screen. If you look at the percentage increases on the right, the town increases are about 4.80%. But remember, we had cuts at the fall town meeting that we used to replenish. They were one-time cuts because of COVID. We were afraid that we put a hiring freeze on, and we put a spending freeze on the prior fiscal year. Well, that hiring freeze carried over to the current fiscal year, which allowed us to make some of those cuts, knowing that we had to replenish that for the following fiscal year. But when you take that into consideration and you add that back in, the town's increase is roughly 2.82. The schools is 2.85. Pretty even. Up top, we look at our tax levy revenue. Our 2.5 is roughly 1.2 million. We're using a good chunk of that. We're using 2.31% of that. Our new growth is estimated at 450. That's the third line down. We believe it's going to come in greater than that. We're not going to know that until roughly late August, early September, when DOR certifies those numbers. So that's something that we have to carry and monitor as we move along. As you can see, all of our available funds, our cherry sheet state aid, and our local receipts. Here are the projections on the local receipts that we're basically using for the FY22 budget, and we're modeling that based upon A, the actuals that we received in 20, and B, the estimates that we just got approved on back in December for our FY21. So when we look at the budget recap, and I apologize, that should say FY22, we have total revenues of $72,505,544.76. That would leave a balance of 92,000 out of 2.5. That's a tax levy utilization of 92.44 of 2.5, which would tax at a rate of 2.31. And our expenses are on the right, 72,413,463.80. When we put together our priorities and our concerns based upon our review with each department head, here are the priorities we came up with and some of the objectives for FY22. So I think early on, we set a priority when we made the budget cuts that we were going to try to add back into roadway reconstruction and our OPEB. The OPEB funding for last fiscal year, we made out of free cash as a result of making those cuts. So we're still able to make our annual funding obligation, albeit at 400, but we're getting roughly another 50 from an employee contribution. We want to prioritize additional funding for the senior center for a program and activity coordinator, although we're not in a position now to consider that because all program and activities have come to a halt given COVID-19. There was an ask for a shared clerical position for fire and DDIS. I can tell you the DDIS portion would be primarily to deal with health-related issues as it relates to COVID and other priorities within the department. The treasurer collector has asked for a half-time clerk. There's a half-time clerk already in there. I can tell you that it's been extremely busy, especially at the service window and the kiosk. That's generated some additional workload in the department. We're going to continue once again to bring tax rate equity to Auburn when we can. We're going to continue to monitor our new growth. We're going to try to maintain our healthy reserve balances and also within our stabilization accounts. And we're going to have to do a cost analysis on our trash collection and disposal and recycling costs. Given the new contract and given that we've noticed a increase in our tonnage at Wheeler Grader as a result of COVID-19. So people are putting out more trash because they're home, they're working remotely. Kids are on a hybrid schedule at school. So that's something that we need to take into consideration during our fee structure. On the concern side, I can tell you we're concerned about the COVID-19 impacts as it relates to operation and revenue collection. We continue to monitor that on a daily basis. We have pending litigation costs that we are keeping an eye on that may be of some concern. Our group health insurance renewal increase. We just had a conference with our administrators today of our group health. Our group health is going up 11.2%. And I can tell you that is COVID driven. We provided for about a 5.5% and a 6% increase in the budget that's before you tonight. We will have discussions on how to try to mitigate that 11.2. I can tell you that we have a very healthy self-insured trust balance that we may leverage as a way to offset that increase. But we'll keep you plugged in and update you as we move along with that item. Our blanket insurance coverage renewal, we're not going to know until June. So that's always a question mark. We're concerned about any downturn in local government as well as the federal and the state level as a result of COVID. We've noticed an increase over the last couple of years in our veteran service benefits. We believe that we hopefully have that budgeted adequately now. And certainly there's some continued uncertainty as it relates to unemployment compensation, given the economy and its impacts on COVID-19. I highlighted our solid waste and recycling costs during the pandemic. We continue to monitor our hotel and motel and meals account. We did take a hit in the last quarter of the fiscal year. We think that's going to come back, albeit slowly. We did increase our revenue projections for that, but not to the extent that we were receiving our actuals for the prior fiscal year. And certainly our unanticipated sped costs, we never know when outside placements are going to be made, or we may have a transfer in. That's something that we have continued discussions with school administration on, and continue to monitor that as the weeks go by. Looking beyond FY22, I can tell you that there are some long-term priorities and objectives that we're concerned with. We'll continue to highlight the EPA stormwater mandates that we have to comply with. We know we have an aging sewer infrastructure. We try to address that through the capital side of the budget, but certainly we just had another failure in our line that was unanticipated. And based upon our aging infrastructure, we're expecting more of that in the future. So that's something we have to prepare a long-term financial plan for. The formulation of a financial plan, if in fact the public safety facility does get approved by the voters through a debt exclusion vote, there is within the budget, there is a $10,000 increase in the election budget for a special election, specifically for the public safety facility. And starting this fall, albeit we're still in 22, we will begin to prepare our schedules and go into negotiations with all our bargaining groups. Certainly those impacts will be felt well beyond 22 for the next 3 years. So that's something that we need to be concerned with as well. So, Madam Chair, members of the board, that concludes my presentation for the FY22 recommended budget. I'd be happy to answer any questions any board members may have as a result of this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kazanovich. Before we take our vote to transmit, I'm going to open it up for board questions or comments. Anyone?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Berthium.
Okay, I have a few things here. First being Bay Path. We mentioned, it looks like it's an increase of about $100,000 to this year's budget. And we mentioned that there's an additional 10 students going from Auburn. In the past, we've always kind of been shy on students for what the town pays for. So are we now maximizing our students there and then adding 10 more? And as a second to that to that question, is part of that 100,000 increase part of the assessment for their recent addition in the last 5 years?
Through the chair to Mr. Berthium, great question. So I can tell you that the student enrollment seems to fluctuate from year to year. I don't know if this is COVID related or whether or not there are just more students interested in an alternative, in a vocational aspect of education. I can tell you that based upon the agreement, I don't know if there's a cap on our student enrollment. But we pay our fair share based upon the number of students that we send to Bay Pass. The assessment is predicated on a number of things. One, this assessment that we received is formulated based upon the governor's recommendation for state aid under his version of the budget. Now, that is subject to change, but that does include our assessment for the facility itself. So for the building addition and modification, our assessment does reflect our share of that cost, as well as any transportation costs that we have to bear as a result of our students going to the school. So we expect this to change based upon different versions of the budget that we may see from the House and the Senate, and ultimately a conference committee budget. But that's something we'll just keep you in the loop as we move along and things change.
Did you have something else, Mr. Berthium?
I do. I have several if you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
So, the Norfolk Agricultural, how many students do we have going there? And is that something that is a SPED type of thing, or is that just another option that's now been brought to the town?
So apparently Norfolk Aggie offers a program that's not offered by Southern Worcester Regional. As a result of that, we have an obligation to pay that assessment for an Auburn student that may opt to go to a different vocational school. We currently have one student enrolled there. I believe that student is going to be a junior, but there is a pending application for another student that has not been determined yet. So we believe that that student will be enrolled. We did provide or increase the assessment to provide for that student, as well as an estimate for the transportation costs that would be shared by both students.
Okay, thank you on that one. The library, I see budget is increased by 70,000. Is that, I know we talked about some exciting things that we want to do with the building itself and expanding it. Does that have anything to do with what we talked about in our last meeting about expanding the library and opening up the back and going toward the, not necessarily for the walking bridge, but for the development of the back of the library? Or is this just standard operations increase?
So this basically replenishes the money that we cut at the fall town meeting. So we cut two of their line items in their budget by about $79,000. This backfills those cuts to bring them back to levels they were before the fall town meeting.
Okay.
Mike, how do I get this stuff shared and back everyone to normal?
And you just hit your shared screen, just click on that key that says screen on the bottom next to the camera, and it will stop sharing your screen.
Not your camera, your screen button.
Yeah, I think yeah. To the right of the camera logo, it says shared screen. Just stop doing that.
I don't see that.
Okay. I think if Mike is still there, he can just make you no longer make you a presenter, right, Mike?
There we go. I think you just did it. Or maybe I did it by mistake. Okay.
Although it's great to see all those windows that you deal with every day. No wonder your head's spinning.
So I guess I'm still sharing my screen.
Yeah, it says that you're presenting.
Yeah, if Mike can just take you off as a presenter, and Ed, put your camera back on.
Give me 1 second, Ed. I'm going to connect your computer and I can shut it off.
Okay.
Mike, thank you.
So while we're doing that,
Oh, there it is. Okay.
okay, well, yeah, so, on the sewer, I noticed a $90,000 increase. And is that, for our recent mishap and, you know, obviously we know there's future, repairs that are coming down, or is the 90 in anticipation of, potential of other things going like what we just experienced?
Lionel, I'm sorry, I got disconnected for a minute. Can you ask that question?
Sure, Ed, thank you. So the sewer, budget increased by 90,000, around 90. Is that an anticipation of, being that we have such an old system that there may be things going on? Or is this just gonna pay for what we just went through?
So the sewer line repairs, the break that we just had is paid through the capital fund. So every year we appropriate roughly $250,000. It used to be $50,000, and we upped it to deal with the major infrastructure concerns that we have. One year we had 2 sewer main breaks that cost us upwards of $230,000. We had to get special DOR approval for deficit spending. So we tried to address that in a long-term plan through the CIP to deal with the day-to-day stuff or the day-to-day failures that we may encounter during the year. I think we need to look at the big picture and decide how we need to address a long-term strategy to upgrade and replace our infrastructure. So I think having discussions with Joanna Paquin, the sewer superintendent, assistant DPW director, as well as Bill Coyle. We had some discussions as it relates to that during our normal discussions about the budget. We need to look at our level of retained earnings and determine whether or not we need to build that up through a revised fee structure to provide for adequate dollars that will allow us to do this over a period of time. Now, we can do that in a number of ways. We can go out for a bond issue and do some major improvements and pay for that over up to 30 years and potentially get some sewer rate relief from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. They participate in that. Or look at some other creative ideas to address a long-term plan that's going to benefit the town and benefit our residents through enhancements.
Okay, there's a line item in here that talks about contracted services for youth commission. Can you just tell me what the contracted services are? It's
No, the contracted services, that's the annual payment we pay to AYFS for counseling services they provide to our residents and our
Perfect.
students.
okay, perfect. And let's see here. I noticed that on the pension and benefit, there was a comment on the budget that says, if paid by 7/1, I'm assuming of 2021, we can save $72,000. Is that something that's achievable, or is the if kind of got me a little worried? So is this something we're intending to do?
So I can tell you we've done this probably the last 3 years when they first offered this discount if they get their assessment up front. I think that assessment allows them to invest that money where they get an ORI to offset that amount. We take advantage of that every year. So from a cash flow standpoint, and I say if, but we're in good financial standing. So we have a lot of liquidity, we have a lot of cash, we're able to do that, okay? If we weren't able to do that, that's why I put the if in there, but no, we have the ability to do that.
Okay. My last thing is, if I'm reading it correctly, the school department budget has an increase of about $750,000. Is there any one particular big portion of that is coming up, or is it based on the new buildings, or why the $774,000 increase?
So, and I'd like this opportunity to thank both Dr. Hanfield and Cecilia. We've had a number of discussions relative to the budget, and I want to applaud them for holding the line. I think it's a responsible budget. I think it's a lean budget. I think this budget reflects just strictly contractual obligations. So we've worked well together with them. I think going in, we had discussions that we may have to revisit the budget depending on revenue, depending on a number of other things. They're willing to have future discussions. And we may certainly have to do that, but right now we believe, and I know their budget is lean, that increase merely reflects their contractual obligations as identified under their union contracts.
So a lot of that is salaries?
It's salary, it's step increases, anything contractual in nature, Lionel, yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Thank you for those great questions. Anyone else? Mr. Liberty?
Madam Chair, through you, I imagine most of my questions will be done via email. I just wanted to ask for something that was mentioned tonight. If the town decides, or if the Board of Selectmen decides not to go forward with a special election, what happens to the $10,000 that we put in that account? Do we roll it over to the spring election, or does it go into a different fund? Just wondering about that.
So through the chair to Tristan, good question. If we decide not to go forward with a special election or a debt exclusion vote, then we would suggest at a fall town meeting that we rescind that $10,000 and put it back into the general coffers.
Okay, thank you. And just an additional through the chair, you'll be available through email, I assume, this week in case, when I finish going through the budget, if I have any additional questions that come up, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Liberty. Anything else? If there's nothing else, is there a motion to transmit the budget to the Finance Committee?
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Wren. I'm sorry,
Second.
and a second by Mr. Liberty. By a roll call vote. Mr. Liberty? I'm sorry,
Yes.
is there any discussion under the motion? Seeing no discussion under the motion. Mr. Liberty?
Yes.
Mr. Berthium?
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Wren?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you, Mr. Kazanovich, for that presentation and for the work you've done and the work you're about to undertake.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
Is there anything else on this item? If not, we will move on. We have a gift acceptance in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53A. And it is to the Auburn Police Department from the Auburn Masonic Association, 75-foot throw bags and training video for ice and water rescue. It has a value of $304.35, and its use is to be used in police cruisers. Is there a motion?
Motion to accept with gratitude.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
We have a motion by Mr. Liberty and a second by Mr. Berthium. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Mr. La Liberty,
Yes.
Mr. Berthium,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mr. Wren,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Thank you. The next item is the annual town meeting for May 4th, 2021. And the recommendation is to vote to open the warrant for the May 4th, 2021 annual town meeting. And that would be voted tonight to open it immediately.
Through the chair, if I may just add something to this item. Right now, the town meeting obviously is scheduled for the first Tuesday in May per our charter and per what we do every year. At this point, we're not 100% certain how we're going to handle the town meeting given COVID. Last year, we moved it off and had it in June, which is a little warmer, and had it outside. So that is still an option. We're just going to be watching the numbers and making a decision as soon as we can, but recognizing that if we go ahead and have it indoors, as we did at the fall town meeting, and that worked out fine, if we keep with that date, then this would be the schedule for getting the warrant opened and closed. So if for any reason we do postpone it until June, there's no harm in following the May schedule, and then we're ready to go. So that's why you see it on there. Right now, our plan is to have it in May as scheduled. Again, want to watch the numbers. We think we can pull it off indoors again, as we did before. But just in case, I just want to let the board know we're going to get everything in place. And if we do have to make that decision, at least this piece of it will already be solidified. Thank you.
Thank you. Do members have anything on this? If not, is there a motion?
Madam Chair, if I can just ask a question
Mr. Carpenter, yes, please go ahead.
through you to the town manager. I'm looking at the dates, and I know every year we always have this tension, but have the boards and commissions been notified prior to us being notified? Just because I'm looking at, when they traditionally meet, and they're not going to have a heck of a lot of time if they have anything to get it to us.
Through the chair, as we do every year, after the board takes a vote, we notify them the first thing in the morning. So if you vote tonight that the warrant is now open, they get the notification tomorrow morning. I would say with the annual town meeting, it's the same schedule every single year. It's always the second, it's always the beginning of May. So if anything, if we were to put it off, it just gives them more time, but we're on the same schedule that we're on every year. All the boards and commissions do know, even though we send an email, they do know when the annual town meeting is. We've actually added a week to our schedule per the suggestion of, I believe from you, Mr. Carpenter, a couple of years ago, and the board supported it to try to get the warrant out early if we can. So based on the schedule that you see before you, we would actually be getting the warrant into the town meeting hands an extra week in advance. And this also would give extra time for boards and commissions to submit anything that they may have. And again, they'll be notified first thing in the morning.
Do you have a follow-up, Mr.
Nope.
Carpenter?
No follow-up.
Okay. Is there anything else on this? Is there a motion?
I would make a motion that we open the town meeting warrant on, give me 1 second. Just want to make sure I'm saying the right date. We're voting to open it tonight or tomorrow. I don't see a date.
We're voting to open it tonight.
Very good. Then I'll make a motion that we open the warrant for the May 4th annual town meeting this evening.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Carpenter and a second by Mr. Wren. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, by a roll call vote. Mr. La Liberty?
Yes.
Mr. Berthium?
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Wren?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. And now we move on to the closing of the annual town meeting. And Mrs. Jacobson, I see you have a recommendation of March 8th or March 15th. I'm going to let you address why we have those two dates on.
Yep. Through the board, again, to Mr. Carpenter's point, we try to give extra time to the boards and commissions to submit warrant articles. We could keep it open for 2 weeks, which previously, many years ago, was the practice, or we could do 3 weeks. Either one works with our schedule. It still gives us enough time to do all the work that we need to do before we get the warrant printed and ready to go. So if possible, I think 3 weeks is a good amount of time to give. So if the board is okay with it, we could close it on March 15th.
Unmute myself. Do members have any comments or questions? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion that we close the warrant on March 15th, 2021. Do we need a time?
What day is that on?
It's a Monday.
Mrs. Jacobson, generally we close it at the close of business.
Yeah, it would be fine. I think the easiest thing to do would be if you, close of business on Monday. Actually, I'd rather you do noon time if you don't mind, because even though it comes into our office, if there's any type of follow-up that we need to do, noon would actually be better on that day. So if we could just say noon, that would be great.
Mr. Carpenter, are you okay with that?
Yep, I will set it for March 15th, 2021 for closing at noon.
Great, thank you.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Carpenter and a second by Mr. Liberty to close the annual town meeting warrant on March 15th, 2021 at noon time. By a roll call vote, Mr. Liberty,
Yes.
Mr. Berthium,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mr. Wren,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Okay, that's all we have on the town meeting. Proclamations and recognitions, we have none. In your packet, you have the timeline for the town manager's evaluation. You did receive the town manager's self-evaluation. I believe everyone received it via email. So do any members have any questions on the timeline? Seeing none, I just wanted to make sure everyone had that. I know this will be Mr. Wren's first evaluation, but we'll follow the same process as we have in years past. Ms. Jacobson, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I'm all set, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Under town manager items, moving along, under town manager items, we have a vote to authorize a grant application, accept and expend the funds for rehabilitation at Leesville Dam, and that's by the DPW. Mrs. Jacobson?
Through the chair, that's correct. There is a letter in your packet from Eilish Corey, our senior civil engineer, who's been working on our DPW grants, and she's doing a great job. So this is an opportunity that was brought to our attention very recently to apply for grant funding through the state's dam and seawall repair or removal grant program. And we are requesting $158,000, which actually funds all the design and permitting. A 25% match is required. That match can come from a combination of our available funds that are already designated for dam and drainage work. The total project cost would be $210,000. So there's no additional funds that need to be allocated anywhere. It just comes out of the funds that we're already using to do such work. So this would actually allow us to use our already budgeted funds to leverage, hopefully, another nearly $160,000 in grant funding if we're approved.
Are there any comments or questions for the town manager on this grant application? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion that we authorize the application, acceptance, and expenditure of the funds for the rehabilitation at Leesville Dam as outlined in Ms. Corey's letter to us.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Carpenter and a second by Mr. Berthium regarding the grant application. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, by a roll call vote, Mr. LaLiberte,
Yes.
Mr. Berthium,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mr. Wren,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Thank you. Moving on, we have a discussion and vote on the town manager goals. I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Jacobson.
Through the chair, thank you very much. I know last time we briefly discussed it and we wanted to wait for a full board. So just to review very quickly, this the coming year, 2021, as you heard from our Tom Scanlon, the auditor, as well as Ed and I have continued to say, and you hear it on the news, COVID is going to take up a lot of our time over the coming year. We recognize that. We know, number one, our CARES funds are eligible for use until the end of December of this year. So that's an entire year of working with CARES funding, our consultant, as well as FEMA, to try to determine what costs could be eligible, et cetera. So we're going to be deep in it with COVID for the coming year. Again, the COVID does affect our operations. We anticipate continued governor's orders to come out. There have been well over, I believe, 60 at this point. And every time an order comes out or a change, we're required to implement it on our end. So that means we have to pivot quickly. We have to be prepared through our inspections in all of our departments to make sure that we're following the orders and we implement whatever it is that comes our way. We expect that to happen over the next few months. It also causes some employee needs, as we have to deal with employees that take advantage of and should take advantage of certain programs that are available, which put some strain on the operations. So I would just, in keeping with this conversation, just wanted to remind the board that we do have COVID concerns coming up this coming year as well. We also, this coming year, hard to believe, but we're getting ready, Ed and I, to head back into collective bargaining. So all of our contracts end a year from June. So we actually start the process this coming summer and fall. And that process is pretty lengthy. We have to analyze and get data on our 13 communities and develop spreadsheets, analyze all of our 10 contracts, and start putting everything in place as to what our collective bargaining strategy is going to be. We actually start sitting at the table in January, but before we can do that, we have to have all the legwork done. So that is another thing that we're working on this year. Lastly, we are still moving forward on two different aspects. One, we still have ongoing litigation issues that are going to be very time consuming. And the Auburn Street reconstruction project, which is very exciting. It is, as you know, that all started in the fall, and that's going to really ramp up in the spring. And a lot of the town's components of that are going to be taking place over the next year. So those are some of the major things that we have on our plate coming up anyway, regardless of how the board sets my goals. A couple of the goals that I would like the board to consider, given everything that we've got coming up, including, collective bargaining, CARES, COVID and CARES, as well as all the work on the Auburn Street Drury Square project. There are 3 goals that we are going to be working toward that I would very much like the board to support for goals for me. There's a couple of reasons for that. I think when it's supported by the board, it helps that the community and all the departments see that this is something that we're all working toward together, and it's kind of a common vision of where we need to go. So the projects that I would propose, as I'm asked every year, what projects would I like to see on there as goals? I would hope that we could keep it to either 2 or 3, given all the other requirements and all the other things that we have coming up. But one would be the continued pursuit of the public safety facility and the process to determine whether we're going to proceed with that. But to determine whether we're going to proceed with that, it's going to take the next 11 months to go through all the public processes, answer many of the questions that are raised on financing, and get ready to answer questions from the public. This may also likely involve, it depends on how the board, what the decision the board makes, but it may involve putting together a special election and putting together the financing package for town meeting in the fall. So that's a major project. So it would, I would ask that the board would consider making that one of the goals, to proceed with all of the steps that are required to determine if we actually are going to move forward with a public safety facility. The second one would be and Mr. Berthium mentioned earlier about this project, we're still very excited about the Library Goddard Park Pedestrian Bridge project. And as you know, at the last meeting, Ed Kazanovich presented, we have a financial plan for matching the $500,000 grant that we're so grateful to receive from the Pappas Foundation. And at that $500,000 is at no cost to the taxpayer. It was a very creative way to finance this. So this is a project that we're going to be notifying the public about, having a lot of public meetings on it, public comment period, and then bringing it to town meeting in May. If it gets approved in May, then we will be moving for the next at least year for putting together, we'll have to come up with a scope of services, RFPs, bids, and everything else that we need to put all these pieces together. So this is a major, major undertaking. I think it's going to be really, really exciting. I think it's going to add a lot to the value of the town and the economic impact in that area. But it is time consuming, and we're excited to take it on. So I'd ask the board to consider that as one of my goals as well. And then lastly, if the board wanted 3 goals instead of 2, I'm going to be working on this anyway, regardless of how the board feels, but as far as making it a priority. But in order for us to continue to get apply for grant funding through the Commission on Disability, we really should have a disability commission. And this takes a bit to set up. You need to have a vote of town meeting. There are some legal requirements to getting it established, and then there are legal requirements to making appointments to it, which are going to take some time. If we can get a disability commission in place, we will be in, I think, a better situation to apply for future grant funding to implement our ADA transition plan, which was a goal that the board had given me the prior year and that we were able to complete. So I think in order to implement that plan that we spent so much time on, it's important that we move forward on the next steps, which is a disability commission. So those would be the 3 goals that I'm going to be working on. All those goals involve just about every department in town. So the reason I'm suggesting it is because it would bring together all the department heads under with common goals that the board would establish, and recognizing that this is a priority and we all need to work toward it. So that would be my request. Again, I'd like the board to keep in mind, and hopefully you know that whatever goals you do give me, I strive very hard and have always met the goals that you've given me. I've always completed all the tasks that you've assigned to me. And regardless of what comes our way, I've always, along with all the department heads, always found a way to get these things done. So I hope that you know that, I'm a hard worker, and just because you establish either 2 or 3 goals, it doesn't mean I'm only working on 2 or 3 things. And I think that's what the important thing is. It means we're probably working on 24 different projects, but these are the ones that I really think involve a lot of different departments and would be nice to see board support moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Jacobson. So one thing, I want to say is we're looking at 10 years of evaluations, and, it's certainly too late now, but, I wish we had looked at the process of evaluating you and setting these goals, because it's not like year 1 or year 2 of evaluating a town manager, where we're trying to determine, your work ethic, your quality of work. We've seen it now for 10 years. We see what you do on a daily basis, but it is part of your evaluation process. What I just want to outline for the board as I was taking notes. So the proposal is to set 2 to 3 goals, depending on the board's vote. Number 1, continued pursuit of the process of the pursuit and process of the public safety complex. Continue the work and completion of the library/Goddard Park project. And then number 3, forming a disabilities commission. And I'll just point out, as the town manager just pointed out, that they handle anything that comes their way. And who would have thought that just a year ago now they would have had COVID thrown at them. And I look at what the town has done, every department has done, and the work on this related to COVID is just incredible. Board members know through executive session the litigation issues that the town manager will be dealing with and the time that will consume. As the town manager mentioned, the Auburn Street project, collective bargaining, we have, is it 10 or 11 unions?
It is 10 on
10.
the town side alone, yes.
10 now. And, you know, I wished we had changed the format for these, for this process, but we haven't. So I fully support the recommended goals of the town manager and thank her for her work on taking on all this extra work that just is thrown at her on a daily basis. I will open it up to board comments and questions.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Carpenter, yeah?
I'm glad we're talking about this process, because I remember when we were talking about renewing the contract a couple of years ago, the majority didn't want to change it. So that's why we're stuck with, frankly, this year, I would, if it wasn't part of the contract, I would say no goals for the manager, because I think she's going to be, as well as the staff is going to be, rather engaged with the uncertainties in the environment that we find ourselves in. So that would have been my preference, is that we would not have any goals for the manager this year, because frankly, she and the staff will have more than enough to do just trying to keep the trains running on time. So we're fortunate that she's willing, and as you say, her work ethic is not one that anybody should question, because she is extremely dedicated and puts in a lot of time. Even, I can attest, after hours and on weekends, even though some of us scold her for this on occasion, but her work ethic is unrivaled, in my opinion. So I think we're very fortunate that we have someone who's willing to not only do the day-to-day, which is enough for any one person, but to take on additional tasks are above and beyond at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. And I agree with you, and I would like to see us, because as she said, if we don't go with 3 goals and just go with the 2 goals, as she said, we know that she's going to continue the work on the Disability Commission. My concern is that the evaluation process, which is part of the town manager's contract, is 50% of the evaluation is goals. So, you know, I'm going to turn to the town manager, but I don't, you know, I don't even think that we have the time or the desire to open up your contract right now to address an evaluation. So I think that we do need to go with at least 2 goals to keep in line with your contract requirements. Mrs. Jacobson?
Through the chair, yeah, based on what is in the contract, and first of all, let me back up. Thank you so much, Mr. Carpenter. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your comments. I'm always happy to answer everyone's emails, no matter when you send them to me. So please, no apologies needed. That's my job. But as far as the goals, yeah, the contract does have an attached evaluation form that says 50, which is, as Mr. Carpenter points out, it is, in a way, looking back, it's difficult. It's a challenge, because if you set 2 goals, that's 50% of the score, and yet the rest of everything that I report on is probably the majority of my time. So as far as that goes, I'm happy to reopen the contract and talk about the evaluation form, coming up for the next year, even if the board wants to temporarily suspend it because of the COVID situation. I think that the board has the ability to do that, and then we can look at how to go forward with the goals. It is daunting, I will say. The report that I passed into all of you today, and it's my fault too. I want to make sure you have enough information to be able to make the evaluation. So I did cut it down this year. I went from about 50 pages to 35. So there's probably therapy for people like me So I'm getting there where I'm giving you hopefully a little bit less, but I want to give you enough so you have what you need to score me. So moving forward, I think it's up to the board. I think you could vote to, given that it is COVID, I think you maybe could vote to not do any additional goals. But as you said through the chair, then we have to come up with a process quickly so that a year from now you'll have something to evaluate me on. So I'm open to whatever. I will tell you that these are the projects that we're going to be working on regardless of the board vote. These are important projects to the town. We have to get these done. Hopefully COVID doesn't preclude us moving forward on these important issues.
I'm going to see if other members have anything they want to add before I add additional comments.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Berthew?
I like the idea, first of all, of suspending the goals for this year. But if we didn't, I would say that we could go with the first two recommendations that the town manager proposed. And I would just say that I'd like that to be, for those goals to be that she work on those two goals, but with no completion dates, because I think it's very difficult for everything going on to try to expect her to meet a goal with an expiration date or a completion date. I certainly feel that we can evaluate her next year based on the progress that's made on those two proposed goals without putting added pressure on the town manager. So if the board was in favor, I would be happy to make a motion to vote on the first two proposed goals with no expected completion date, and I think we could do a fine evaluation from there.
So Mr. Berthew has made a motion to set the goals as, and I'll use the word continued, continued pursuit and process, continued and process of the public safety complex with no specific end date. And goal number 2, continue work on the library/Goddard Park project. Is there a second for discussion?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, Mr. Carpenter has seconded the motion. So we're now under discussion on this. Do members have anything they want to add? So I'll just add quickly. I'm happy to see that we're going to move forward with the two goals. My concern about suspending, which I in theory, I support suspending, but I think it would make it difficult for whoever is on the board next year to do this evaluation, not knowing that there were specific goals and a report that will be presented on those goals. So I support the motion, and I also I don't think we can do it tonight because it's not on the agenda. Support forming a subcommittee of the Board of Selectmen to enter into discussions with Mrs. Jacobson on the evaluation process. Do board members have anything?
Yes, through the chair.
Mr.
The
Mann.
grant money that was, Ms. Jacobson, that you had referenced, will that not be available if we hold off this ADA subcommittee?
Through the chair, it's not a requirement to apply. When you apply for ADA grant project implementation funds, it's not a requirement to have a disability commission. It just strengthens your application, but it's not a requirement. We actually applied for $240,000 this prior year from it to implement ADA improvements to our playgrounds, and we were rejected. And I called the state and wanted to get some feedback as to why that application was rejected, so maybe we can improve the next time we applied. And a couple things that came up is, number one, there just wasn't enough money to go around with all the requests that they had. And number two, our request was for $240,000 with the max being $250,000. And the suggestion was maybe we break it into a series of smaller grant applications and apply for 3 or 4 playgrounds, each in a separate application. And the third recommendation was that we get a disability commission in place that may help the application. But I would tell you that they also recognize that it's a challenge to get a disability commission because there are a lot of requirements for the people who are appointed to it, and a lot of communities have trouble filling those requirements. So, we could work on setting one up. We just don't know until we get it established if we're going to be able to find residents that meet the criteria to serve on.
Anything else? So we have a motion and a second to set 2 goals for the town manager. If there's nothing further, by a roll call vote. Mr. LaLiberty?
Yes.
Mr. Berthium?
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Wren?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you, Mrs. Jacobson.
Thank you all. Much appreciate it.
Do you have anything else under town manager, under town manager items?
Yeah, I just want to make a note because we're still getting phone calls from residents, and just to do whatever we can to get the word out. And as you all know, we notified the public last week through social media or our website, Auburn Cable TV, Code Red. We're disappointed, but we recognize that this is, it's out of our hands, and it was a decision that the state made for a lot of good reasons that the state has. But on our end, we're no longer going to be able to offer a COVID clinic at the senior center for our residents. So we want to make sure our residents are aware of that. Anyone who did receive a first vaccine through any of our clinics will receive a second vaccine. The state has guaranteed that. So we don't want people to worry. We want to put their mind at ease. There's a lot of anxiety about this anyway. And we apologize that we're not able to proceed, but we also feel confident that there are, hopefully soon, will be additional sites, and most importantly, vaccine supply. Because it doesn't matter who's running the clinics, right? You need the supply. So whether it's a town or whether it's a regional site or whether it's a state super site, we need to get vaccine from the federal government. So as that vaccine comes in, we're hopeful that there'll be more appointments that are available for our residents as well as everyone else in the Commonwealth who are seeking to get these vaccines. So we recognize it's a challenging process. It's frustrating. There's a lot of anxiety. If we can help answer questions, we're happy to do that. But just wanted everyone to know we're no longer able to run the clinics. And I want to thank everybody who was involved in the clinics we did run. They were very successful. The residents were pleased with it. We had some great, our employees did a phenomenal job. We had some volunteers, and it was just a great process. And who knows, maybe in the future as vaccine supply becomes more readily available, maybe once again we'll be able to reopen our clinic and get supply again at the local boards of health. But right now that's not an option. Thank you.
Thank you. We have nothing else under town manager items. We have no tabled items. Do Board of Selectmen have any member items or anything they want to discuss? Seeing none, we have no minutes. So I will, and it does have to be by a roll call vote, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Carpenter, a second by Mr. LaLiberty. Mr. LaLiberty?
Yes.
Mr. Berthium?
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Wren?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you virtually on March 8th. Have a good night.